Hello, this is Bo Wells with DiscoverManageSecure.com, and today we're going to talk about how to implement an effective patch management strategy within your organization. We'll talk about three different topics. First, we'll talk about planning. How do we go out and get those TPS guys, those teams, those policies, and those schedules set within our organization and agreed upon? The very first thing you've got to do when implementing a patch management strategy within the organization is get executive support. People inherently are afraid of change, and we're going to be changing a lot of items throughout the organization with patches, and we need to make sure that we have executive support or you'll get trumped pretty quick. Second, we need to gather a team. We've got to make sure that everyone feels like they have their hand in the patch management strategy and policies and decision making. Otherwise, once again, we'll have more political problems. So go out, let's get that data center management team involved. They're one of the most important areas to secure. The application management team, we need to make sure that we get enough information from those guys to make sure that we're not going to cause a negative impact on their actual applications. The help desk guys, they feel the wrath of everything that we're going to do from a patch management standpoint. So we need to make sure that they are there as our first line of defense and know what's going on with the patches that we're deploying out so that they can give us the information back so that hopefully we can either stop rolling a patch out or know the impact of a patch within the organization. And of course, the desktop engineering team. This is a newer area that some organizations may not have yet. It's probably your more senior desktop guys that are responsible for the actual configuration management, typically managing your systems management tool set within the environment. And then, of course, outside of IT, we need to make sure that we identify those individuals within the organization, hopefully a couple in each department, that are friends of IT. They have a technology mindset, and they don't mind us deploying out patches a little bit earlier to them than we do everyone else. That way we can hear back whether or not we're causing a negative impact before we roll it out to the entire organization. So from a policy standpoint, we need to identify our scope. So let's go out and identify which operating systems meet our compliancy requirements. So something we're actually going to focus on. In most organizations, of course, this is going to be Windows. In some organizations, that may include Mac. In other organizations, you might even consider starting to bring in some of the mobile operating systems, the iOSs of the world, the Androids of the world, the Chrome of the world, and go out and take a look at those types of items. Then, of course, set an idea for severity of patches. Maybe we're only going to address something that's high, critical, or a service pack level, and maybe we need to have a different rollout strategy for those different levels of patches. Don't forget about the items beyond Microsoft. Of course, the majority of the threats that are coming out in the world now are not Microsoft like they used to be. So we need to make sure that we have an effective deployment strategy for going out and deploying out third-party patches, especially out in that area of browsers, since that's got such a huge attack surface. We need to find out when those vendors that we choose in that first item, we need to find out what the release schedule is. Do they have a common cadence for the release schedules? And we need to find out where we go to get that information in order to go out and receive alerts, receive information on how we should be rolling those items out. And then we need to identify which applications can't be patched. There's certain applications out there, especially in the medical world or in the process control automation or SCADA world, that cannot be patched until the actual vendor blesses the patch to be rolled out. So that's an item that you really need to pay close attention to, and you need to be able to identify those devices that contain that software. And then, of course, we also need to identify a tool set that can go out and can identify which machines are missing these patches, and a tool set that can help us remediate those patches within the organization. And then, of course, we need the ability to measure ourselves. So we need to be able to go out and find a report that our company is able to receive information back from the different areas of the business, not only from a patch vulnerability standpoint and remediation standpoint, but also start thinking about your uptime reporting and your alerting when it pertains to this, because we need to be able to understand the impact that our patch management strategy is impacting the business with. A couple places to look at. First of all, mybulletins.technet.com. This is a great place to go out and get information about which patches Microsoft is releasing. We need to make sure that we keep a close eye on this, especially being that Microsoft is saying that they're now going away from the Patch Tuesday mentality. So this is an area we probably need to keep a closer eye on. Adobe, another great one. If you go out to blogs.adobe.com/PSIRT, it's a great website to be able to go out and let you know what's going on. You can subscribe to both of these and customize both of these so that they only represent the patches that you need to be addressing within your organization and the products you need to be addressing in your organization. So as it pertains to scheduling, number one, have a reoccurring schedule. Have it at a regular time that people can expect. Most organizations will do this the weekend after Patch Tuesday. It will be interesting to see how that changes in the world now that Patch Tuesday is starting to go away. Have a standard form of communication both before and after your patch window. It's important to let everyone know that this is coming. It's important to ask them to take means on their own in order to make sure that the patches take place at a convenient time for the end user, but it's also important to have a protection mode to be able to go out and enforce patches for those that don't follow the proactive procedures. And then we also need to have that all clear email that goes out to let everyone know that we have rolled out all the patches to, in most cases, the data center, and that we've begun the patch management process on the endpoint. Remember, the data center is something that will probably happen under our control and will be completed under our control. But those endpoints, they function at a different cadence because we have to wait for them to connect to the network. We don't always know where they are within our network, and they may not always be on our network. So we need to have a deployment strategy that includes those challenges. And then also, check and make sure if your organization has other maintenance windows, specifically a data center maintenance window. One thing I'll caution you on, from my experience, it's not always a good idea to have your patch window at the same time as a data center maintenance window. The problem is, if you're going out and you have something like a storage array that's being worked on, or a SAN or a NAS device within your organization that's being worked on, the majority of the servers in your data center are probably going to be taken down as a part of that. Hence, you're going to have a much shorter window, if even any window, in order to be able to meet your SLA for that actual data center maintenance to be completed. Then, of course, building power management. These are always some areas that you need to be aware of, just to know whether or not your data center is going to be able to be patched at that point in time. And then, of course, have a process for approvals. Have a group that meets regularly. Probably the best thing to do is meet as soon as Microsoft releases their patches. That way that can be part of your monthly cadence, since Microsoft is the primary focus that most individuals have within patch management. Plan on meeting on Tuesday afternoons and then discuss which patches across all the different vendors that you agreed to. Discuss what's in scope for that month's patches. And then develop a process to be able to go through and evaluate those patches, and then go through and, of course, have another meeting closer to your actual release date in order to determine what impact they've begun to show within the organization on potential test devices, and then whether or not that represents enough of a risk to not move forward. So workstation patching. Once again, these guys are fairly easy, but they're also complex. So there's a lot of intricacies here that we need to be aware of. So from a schedule standpoint, the biggest suggestion that I can give you is, even if your deployment tool is not prepared to deploy the moment that Microsoft releases their patches, go out to Microsoft on your security team's devices in particular, just in case someone has an exploit that's released just after the actual patch is released. We need to make sure that those guys are ready to defend our network. So let's go out and get those guys on first. Also, those are the guys that are going to be the most familiar with the patches that are being deployed out and need to know whether or not there's going to be any type of an ill effect or negative effect within the environment. So those are your first guys that you want to get that out to. And I would suggest that as soon as you can, you get that out to your IT department, and your IT department is your first rollout phase. Now, once you've done that, I typically like a burn-in of about 1 day for your IT department. Then start rolling out to your early adopters that we identified earlier. These are those individuals that are not in IT. I'd like to see one in facilities, one in HR, one in finance, one in sales, one in marketing. Get good saturation across all those business units. Try to get at least 2 people in each of those, and make sure that those critical business service individuals, make sure that they consume the critical business services. Don't just get an administrative assistant that does not use the actual business services. Get one of the analysts within each department that actually utilizes the critical business services, so you can make sure that you're not going to have an ill effect on those items. Then let's roll out to the entire organization, have a strategy for that. We'll talk more about this in the other items to consider section. But remember, let's also find a way to exclude those devices out that cannot be patched. Now, data center. Once again, this is all about the uptime, so it's very important that you have an effective strategy within the data center. First, configuration management. Your CMDB plays such a huge part as it pertains to your data center patch management. If nothing else, when something goes wrong, you know who's going to be impacted, what's going to be impacted, and probably who's going to come yelling at you. And then also you're going to know who you're going to reach out to in order to get that fixed. So first of all, it's imperative that you have records for every single server and application running in the data center. You need to know what impacts what. So for example, if I negatively impact a database server, I need to know which application servers, because it's probably going to be many application servers that I'm going to have an ill effect on. So I need to know who's responsible for administering that database server, who the application owner is of that SQL on that data center, and then I need to have the dependencies of those front-end servers, and I probably need to know the executives that are responsible for the business services that those web services are running. That way I know which executives are probably going to be on the phone with my executive, so I can go ahead and have him give a proactive reach out in order to be able to appear as though we have a good grasp on what's going on within the situation. So identify the application owner. To me, the application owner is the actual developer working on the application itself, or at least the lead of the individuals that are working on that. Next, server management sponsors. These guys are probably going to be in the IT operations team. If it's your SQL guys, you probably have that guy that's your lead SQL. There's always going to be an individual in the team that probably makes the most sense to sponsor that specific category of server if you have a decent sized data center. And then those executive sponsors, once again, that's the person that's going to come screaming that wants to make sure that their application is back up as soon as possible. And then the other item is you need to be able to identify your reboot authority. Reboot authority is something I came up with a long time ago when I was implementing patch management for an organization I worked with. Basically, there's 3 different types of reboot authority that we came up with. First, there's yes. Yes means I can reboot this server as many times as I want during an actual data center maintenance window. No. No means I cannot ever reboot this server. This is something that probably needs an application owner to actually be the person that goes out and does the actual reboot themselves, because there's multiple intricacies of the shutdown process as well as the startup process. And then the third one was a little bit different. It's stop required. And what stop required is that means that as long as the application owner goes out and stops a couple services or runs a routine to prepare the actual server for maintenance, then I can go out and I can reboot that server one time. And then, should I need to reboot it again, I probably need to contact the application owner in order to be able to have them, once again, go through their procedure to prepare that machine for reboot. Now, a couple warnings and things to look out for in the data center. First of all, clustered servers. Those guys are going to have some special reboot requirements that you need to go out and pay attention to. You might need to reboot the active node on the cluster first, wait for the actual failover process and validate that it's failed over before you go back and reboot the new active node on the cluster. Be aware of storage space on the operating system drives. Some patches, or all patches, actually extract to the actual OS drive. So it's imperative that we keep a close eye on this, because if you start rolling out patches regularly, it's not uncommon to see those temp directories and those actual uninstalled directories get quite large within the operating system. So if you don't have a large surplus of data, keep an eye on that. Otherwise, it might come back and bite you, and it's typically going to bite you in the form of a server that doesn't come back online. Don't neglect those other items, your appliances, your VMs, your hypervisors. On the VMs, make especially sure that you pay attention to those VMs that are turned off and that potentially could be turned back on. Have a strategy for going out and addressing those, and know that there are solutions out there that can help you even if you want to patch those VMs offline. We see a lot of organizations that have VMs that turn on and suddenly infect a network because you didn't have the capacity to bring all of those offline VMs on during the maintenance window. So as a result, a lot of organizations will leave them unpatched. Have a strategy for this, even if it's just anytime you turn a VM on that was offline, it has to go through a patch management strategy. It needs to be secluded off the network, however your strategy is on that. And then have a method to validate that all of your applications and servers are back online. Not only that they're back online, but that the end users can consume their services. So a couple other items to consider. Number one, beware of bandwidth. Have a strategy for how we're going to get all of these files, all these binaries, out to the endpoints and to the other servers in the data center, and validate a way that's not going to impact business as usual. Lots of really neat technologies out there in order to be able to minimize the amount of impact to your organization. Pre-stage patches where possible. So if I have a tool that can trickle the actual binaries out there at a slower rate, maybe I can do that in advance. It's always a good idea. Plus, by having that patch out there, if there is an actual vulnerability that gets exploited and a denial of service attack takes place that renders my systems management or security management tool set useless because the network is unfunctional, then it's great to already have the files local. That way we can get access to the console and those devices, and we can go through a manual install process. That's a worst case, but it's something that is a lot better than having to pass around USB drives, CDs, all those different kinds of things. And then, with your actual security management tool set, download all the patches. I speak from experience on this. When my organization was hit by NEMDA, we did not have the appropriate patches already downloaded within our organization. Because NEMDA was such a large denial of service attack within our organization, it was going to take, it was pretty much impossible to download the patches that we needed. So we actually had to send someone home, which was an hour one direction. They had to download what they needed, burn it on a CD because this was before USB times, and then of course we needed to have them come back, which was another hour. So that was over 3 hours that we had to sit back and wait and not have a deployment strategy. So have those items downloaded within your organization. It may seem excessive, but guys, storage is cheap in comparison to downtime. And then also, consider an IT operations analytics tool set. These are tool sets that can go out within your organization and detect if the end user is able to consume those critical business services, and it's also going to be an effective part of your patch management strategy. I really think that these are the next evolution within our patch management process. This has been Bo Wells with DiscoverManageSecure.com. I post lots of other articles on my blog. Please visit me at www.discovermanagesecure.com.